Welcome to another edition of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 37 years. And in that time, I've learned many things, and I'd like to share some of those with you. Well, one of the things that we really care a lot about when we have multiple sclerosis concerns the sort of changes that we can make to our lifestyle to make a difference in multiple sclerosis. As we know, there's no cure for the disease, but there are certainly things we can do to keep our symptoms from getting worse, or perhaps avoid even getting some of those symptoms. And today I'd like to focus on diet. Now, if you've watched my channel, you know that I've already had some episodes about certain diets, particularly the Swank diet, which I do recommend. But I was thinking today that I would look at whether there is any kind of consensus about the sorts of foods that we can eat, and perhaps the sorts of foods that we should be avoiding in order to keep our MS under control as much as possible. I found a few sites. Let's just take a look at those and see if we can spot some commonalities that will give us some good information that we can use in our lives. Well, the first one that I looked at was the Mayo Clinic. And if you're not familiar with the Mayo Clinic, it's in Rochester, Minnesota, and other places too. It is probably one of the premier medical facilities in the country. So they have a section on multiple sclerosis, and I did put the URL there, and I'll put it in the description box also, so you can check this site out. But I just hit some of the highlights and quoted some parts of the site that are relevant to our discussion today. And I'll just read this for you. It says, overall, people with MS need a balanced, low-fat, and high-fiber diet. Unprocessed or naturally processed foods are preferred to processed foods. This is similar to the Mediterranean diet and the same healthy diet that's recommended for the general population. Also consider limiting alcohol as much as possible. And that's kind of a good summary paragraph in a way, because you're going to see the things that I've highlighted other places as we go through. So just keep that in mind. They go on to say that some research suggests a diet low in saturated fats and supplemented with omega-3 fatty acids. And that is certainly something you've heard of before if you listen to my episode on Dr. Swank's diet. Probably his major concern is the amount of saturated fat that we consume and its effect on multiple sclerosis. It is recommended, as they say, people with MS limit animal-based fats and opt instead for fish, which I guess is not an animal. I always kind of thought it was. But fish is a different kind of protein. So opt for fish and nut-based sources of protein, such as olive oil, avocado oil, and almond butter, which are rich in omega-3s. And then finally, researchers are also investigating a link between vitamin D and biotin, which is a form of vitamin B, also known as vitamin H, on multiple sclerosis disease activity. And the studies are in the early stages, but regardless, we want to be sure that we keep our vitamin D levels in the upper range of normal. And you can talk to your doctor about that. Those tests are separate from the normal blood work that we have done, and unless you specifically request a vitamin D test, it is not usually performed because apparently they are a little bit pricey, and insurance may or may not cover it. But certainly if your doctor insists on you having it, I would think that would make a difference as to whether the insurance would cover it. Well, the next site that I looked at was out of the National MS Society, and again, I've provided the link here for you. And it says the same thing as we saw with the Mayo. While we do not yet know that a specific diet will help your MS, any positive changes you make towards more healthful habits are likely to help your overall health and well-being and are therefore worthwhile. And here's the guidance that they provide. prepare meals at home as much as possible. And they don't say, but I would think that the reason for that would be mainly that you know exactly what's in your food if you make it at home. You know how much salt, you know where the meat came from, you know whether the produce is organic or not. Whatever you eat in a restaurant, you sort of have to trust that they use quality ingredients and that you're getting what you think you're getting. But if you prepare it at home, you have a much better chance of getting what you think you're getting. Well, then they also say to incorporate colorful, fresh fruits and vegetables daily. I had a book, Eating the Rainbow, I think, and it's a good one because it really talks about how important it is to eat vegetables and fruits that span the rainbow colors, because every color indicates that there's other minerals and vitamins, all of which are going to provide you with good and distinct nutrition. If you choose to eat grains, choose whole grains over refined grains. Again, a theme you're going to see over and over again. Whole grains are much to be preferred over refined grains. So in other words, if you make your own bread at home with whole grains, you're likely to do better nutritionally than if you buy crackers or store-bought bread of any kind. Even the stuff that calls itself whole grain actually has a pretty low percentage of actual whole grains in it, believe it or not. And then finally, again, avoid or limit processed foods and added sugars as much as possible. And sugar, again, is something you're going to see show up because sugar is refined and also very processed and also has very little nutritional value, even though it may be pretty high in calories. And then I looked at the Healthline website, which you'll see the URL for here below. And there's a list of foods that you should include on a diet that is MS friendly. Again, fruits and vegetables of all kinds and all grains, and they give some examples here, nuts and seeds, fish, and they say all fish, but especially fresh fish and fatty, oily fish, such as salmon and mackerel, because of their high omega-3 content and their vitamin D content. And then they say, and I did not highlight this because they say to eat all meat, all fresh meat, and they include beef, chicken, and lamb. And I don't know about that. I don't know that that's as universal as some of the ones that I did highlight. I haven't seen that in every one of the sites that I looked at. And in fact, some sites say to avoid most meats, and you just noticed that earlier, that meat in general is not necessarily something we want to be consuming a lot of. And again, eggs, I did not highlight because I see some sites say kind of try to avoid eggs, even though there is some good nutrition to be had there. And again, dairy products, they say to consume them, perhaps for their calcium content, I don't know. But there are other sites that say don't consume dairy products, so I did not highlight that. I highlighted fats because the specific fats that you should be consuming are the healthy fats, and you see some listed there: olive, flaxseed, coconut, and avocado oils. And then probiotic-rich foods. This is something that other sites didn't specifically talk about, but I do think probiotics are good. Fermented foods in general provide you with good nutrition, so they've got some listed here as examples. And then again, beverages, especially water. We probably don't get nearly the water that we should get. It helps in so many ways, not just for MS, but for many things. Also, herbal teas. I guess what it's suggesting here is that teas that contain caffeine need to be consumed in moderation. And then all fresh herbs and spices. And I suppose even the dried ones. I've seen many articles and sites that talk about using the dried ones because there is nutrition to be had there. In short, the guidelines for an MS-friendly diet are similar to an overall nutrient-rich, well-balanced diet. You've seen that before. However, It emphasizes consuming more plant-based foods and grains, and that you've seen. And then they have a list of foods to avoid if you have MS, and this I thought was pretty useful. Processed meats for sure. Any kind of cured meat or processed meat. And they've got sausages, bacon, canned meats, meats that are salted, smoked, or cured. So really do try to minimize or avoid those altogether. Refined carbohydrates, and that we've seen again as a common theme. White bread, pasta, biscuits, and flour tortillas, if that's made with basic white flour. So you can find pasta these days that's made with chickpea flour, lentil flour, other kinds of flour that are more healthy for you than the white flour stuff. Just try to avoid white flour as much as possible. And then fried foods. Avoid anything that's fried. French fries, fried chicken, mozzarella sticks, and donuts. And that's just a few examples of the kinds of foods that we should be avoiding, because frying food changes it chemically and introduces things that are perhaps carcinogenic. Then highly processed foods such as fast food, potato chips, and convenience and frozen meals. That's another common theme that we keep running into. And then finally, trans fats such as margarine, shortening, partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. Trans fats are not as prevalent in foods anymore because those have been taken out by law. It's forbidden to put those in now, although there's trace amounts in just about any kind of thing. But partially hydrogenated foods, you will find that. And if you look at the ingredient list on a lot of the foods that you buy, it will include partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. And the reason that they do that is because it makes it shelf stable. So in other words, you buy a box of crackers, if the oil were not partially hydrogenated, it would go rancid much quicker than if it were chemically changed. And fine, if you want shelf-stable crackers, that's great, but I don't know, how much is that worth it to you, because that's maybe not so healthy for you. And then finally, just a couple more. Sugar-sweetened beverages, absolutely, yeah, so sugar, once again, such as energy and sports drinks, soda, and sweet tea. And then alcohol, once again, limit your consumption of all alcoholic beverages as much as you possibly can. And then the next site that I looked at was WebMD. There was an article that they had in there, 10 best foods for multiple sclerosis. And so here's the link down below. And these are the 10 that they talk about. Turmeric is good for you because it's supposed to help your nerves. There's a lot of studies that seem to indicate that that would be good. Now, it may be something, though, that you would have some side effects from, so you might want to check with your doctor before you start taking it as a supplement. For example, if you're not really crazy about the taste of turmeric, you might say, well, I can just get that in a capsule. But that level of curcumin in your system might be more than you should be getting. So you might check that with your doctor, although I have not heard of anyone who's had a problem with that. And then the next one is vitamin D. This would, of course, help prevent osteoporosis, which is a weakening of the bones. And the last thing you need if you have multiple sclerosis is any kind of thing that weakens your bones and makes it even more difficult for you to walk and move around. Sunlight would be the best place to get that from, but if you can't get it from sunlight, if you live in a northern latitude like I do, or if you live in an area where the sun just doesn't come out, or if you don't get outside very much, a supplement may be the better course for you. And then fruits and vegetables, we've certainly talked about that before. And ginger, now they advocate fresh ginger because it's got some good medicinal effects. They say that it may help calm the immune system, and it might even help with memory and thinking. And as I said, they advocate using fresh ginger and even making a tea with it. You could try that. It might be really pretty good. Maybe put a little honey or some kind of sweetener in it to make it more palatable if you don't care for the taste of ginger just on its own. And here's one that they advocate that we haven't really talked about specifically, but fiber, of course, is very good for anyone, and certainly someone with multiple sclerosis. Fiber will aid in your digestion and your regularity, shall we say, because those of us who have MS often have trouble with that. And anything that you can do to help your body eliminate waste, you should be doing it. So fiber and water are probably your two best friends when it comes to that. Green tea, we've already talked about earlier. That can be really good for you. And now see, here's where they talk about dairy alternatives. They don't believe that you should be eating milk because there's a link, a possible link. Studies are indicating that there may be a link between milk and neurological diseases like MS, like Parkinson's, others. Cow's milk is really suspect here. So you might look at other kinds of dairy alternatives like cashew milk or almond milk, coconut milk, oat milk. The shelves nowadays are full of dairy alternatives. They are tasty and they do a lot of the same job that cow's milk will do. I will caution you that they don't always serve the same function in recipes. In recipes where you need things to set up, that may not always work with the dairy alternatives. And then fatty fish, we've talked about that before, salmon and other fish that's fatty and it's got a lot of omega-3s in it, that's good for you. Lean protein, so in other words, some cuts of meat, I suppose, are not as fatty and they are good for you. And then also whole grains, we've talked about that. Another site that I looked at was Can Do MS, and there's the URL. There's a lot of different programs and resources on that site. Just yesterday, I watched this webinar on eating well with or without MS, and I just pulled this one slide because, again, it reiterates many of the same principles. So you're wanting to look at a variety of colorful plant foods every day, and they give you the amounts there. Whole grains, and again the amounts, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, lean protein, and they talk about how variety matters, so don't get stuck just eating one thing. Try to eat a range of things because there are different nutrients to be had in different kinds of food. And I'd say that's a good piece of advice in general. If there are certain fruits or certain vegetables that you really like, they're maybe very good for you, but you want to be sure that you do get some variety. So don't get stuck eating the same one all the time. Try to eat a variety. And then the next one is heart-healthy unsaturated fats, because there are good nutrients in those. And then low-fat calcium foods to support bone health. And then they want you to limit salt, saturated fat, added sugars, and highly refined foods. Nothing new there. And then finally, avoid trans fats entirely, which is easy to do these days because it's really not supposed to be there. Well, I hope that all of that was helpful for you. It's all fairly consistent. I hope that you can make use of this and that you're planning for 2022. All of the meals that you will have will be enjoyable and healthier. And that's all that I have for you today. Give me a comment if you have settled on a particular way of eating, or if you have some ideas, if you have some feedback on any of what I provided, if there's other websites or books that you have benefited from, I'd really love to know. I hope you're enjoying this winter weather that we're having too. It's kind of a different winter from the last couple, but it's to be expected that it's going to snow. It's wintertime, right? Well, stay safe and stay warm, and I will see you again in my next video.